Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling. Shall we see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today? Well, you can probably tell by today's title, we are going to be talking about Arcane. Just to warn you, if you're new here, I am not someone who's recreating any of Arcane or anything like that in Animal Crossing. This is literally just a daily vlog I do in Animal Crossing, and today's topic is Arcane, Season 2 specifically. I will warn you before we get into spoilers. I'm going to warn you now that we're basically immediately all bets are off when it comes to spoilers, because I don't think it's going to be feasible to talk about this in the way I want without talking about spoilers. So after the intro is when you should leave if you do want to remain spoil free. Hello everyone, I'm Fawnhallow. It's 5:22 PM on Sunday, November 24th, 2024. But yes, so it's your final warning. From here on out, literally anything in Season 1, Season 2 of Arcane could be spoiled. Big, small, anything is off bounds. I know normally I build up to it, like doing smaller things and bigger things, but I think I do not feasibly think I could do it for this. So, okay, if you're still here, presumably either you already seen it or you don't mind being spoiled. But wow, what a good show! I guess I could have said that beforehand, but whatever. Season 2 was fantastic. I loved it a lot. Do I think now? Here's the thing, if you go on Reddit at least, which seems to be surprisingly negative about Season 2 of Arcane, do I think it's perfect? No, I don't think it's quite perfect. I think it's like a sort of thing where I'd be like, technically I don't think it's 10 out of 10 because it's not literally perfect, but also nothing is literally perfect, so there's literally nothing that's gotten 10 out of 10. But I think it's functionally 10 out of 10, which is basically, it is, to me, an effective perfect show. You know, I don't know many things I would also give 10 out of 10. I think the only other 10 out of 10 I've given is like Last Wish is 10 out of 10. Amelia, excuse me. But like, I don't even know where to start. Like, I guess we could start with the bad things, the criticisms I see about it. There's two main ones I see, which I can understand, and one I agree with, one I'm like lesser so. I'm not sure if I agree with as much, but I still understand. The first one that I hear people mention is of pacing issues in episode 8 and episode 9 specifically, which I understand, because it goes from something which is much more sort of, I suppose, solemn, like a heart-to-heart emotional conversation, to 8 and 9 being the sort of grand climax finale of the entire 2 seasons of Arcane. So of course things are going to be pushing forward, like, quite quickly. And I understand when people say that where are those heart-to-heart tender moments, I suppose, in those last 2 episodes, which, you know, I do appreciate those soft, tender moments, those emotional ones. Like, I mean, episode 7 was a gold mine for that. But episode 8 and 9, I felt like it would have been... Episode 8 maybe could have been. But episode 9, I felt like it would have been weird if we had as many of those slow, tender, slow down moments. Because it's the climax. It's the end. Everything is meant to happen in this. This is what it's all been leading up to. Do I think... Now, here's a question. Do I think Arcane would have benefited from another season? I'm sure they could have done something good with another season, but the story that we have encapsulated so far, I don't think it needs another season. I think it probably needed one more episode or a longer episode for it to, if it wanted to please literally everyone with the exact same sort of pacing, I suppose. But I'm not upset with how episode 8 and episode 9 went. I do agree it is fast paced, but I don't think it comes at the cost of a show. The things it comes at the cost of depends on what you wanted from the show, I think. And I think because Season 1 was so focused with like these family and dynamics and political struggle, I suppose, and Season 2 ended up sort of escalating it even further to being like not as only a political struggle, but it's a very complicated political struggle with interwoven family dynamics and inherited danger, I suppose, from it, and interweaving character arcs with it, and the scale of the character dynamics between things now go from a much more personal struggle to a large political influence to literal world-ending threat. Escalations happen, I suppose, all the time throughout stories, and perhaps with the stakes being raised and raised and raised, I can understand that if you weren't on board with escalating sort of level of threats and scope that came with the later parts of Season 2, you probably wouldn't, you'd feel like this feels too rushed for what's going on, like it's zoomed over some parts that you wanted to see fleshed out. But at the same time, I don't fully agree with it because, well, it's not, I don't really feel like the pacing affected my personal view on it, because to me, a lot of those things which people wanted to see either were closed out, or in my view were always side things, or were not relevant. I'm trying to think of a good one. I think Maddie is a big one. People just her heel turn sort of came out of nowhere, and I'm just sort of well, she was always a side character, and some and an element of unknown suspicion, I suppose, in the entire thing. She was clearly a rebound for Keenan in the first place, which in a narrative sense you're not meant to necessarily root. People are meant to be rooting for Caitlyn and Vi, right? They're one of the main characters. Of course, they want you to root for the champions in their game. So of course, that sort of over-level meta-narrative influence of Maddie's seemingly too innocent personality allows people to be suspicious of it. I would say I didn't think she would be that much of a heel turn. I thought that maybe she had some other ulterior motive, of course, but I thought she was doing it for power. Under Caitlyn's control, necessarily more so than under Ambassador's favour. But I thought it was fine in that aspect. She was a side character. The fact that she died almost immediately afterwards, was incredible, because her character is not meant to serve herself as much as it's meant to serve the main characters, Mel in this case, and Caitlyn, and the main plot. That's kind of how I see it. Similar with the other guy whose name I can't even remember, with Vi's mentor, who she saw Vander in, he got a rather unceremonious death and a drastic death, which pulls at the heartstrings. Yes, definitely, but he was always a side character. We didn't even know his name for ages. Would it have been cool if they got fleshed out? Yeah, I think it would have been cool if they had maybe even a mini story arc, but with the nature of how stories go, that's not how things work. Not everyone is a main character of a story. Some people have to be side characters, some people have to have passing glances, some people have to sort of stay and sit down for a while, and some people, who are the main characters, get to live there permanently, That's just kind of how it goes. So I feel like depending on how much you liked those side characters, probably influenced how much you thought the pacing was iffy. There's also some things which I understand as well, people saying that Echo and Jinx's scene in the final part was, they wanted to see resolution of that. And it sort of brings me on to the second criticism I see a lot, is that it feels so unresolved. This I feel less strongly about, the pacing I kind of agree with in parts, but I don't agree with all of it. The unresolved one I feel is, I kind of want it to be that sort of unresolved, I don't want necessarily a conclusive end to the story, because the story follows, I suppose, more about the dynamics of the people and the narrative exploration. In my opinion, the biggest focus of Arcane being of what Arcane Season 1 being what could have been, and Arcane Season 2 being forgiving what happened. Of forgiveness, so regret and forgiveness, I would say, are the two major themes, and that narratively was finished exploring by the time it comes around to the things which are unresolved, like what happens to Piltover and Zorn. To me, it doesn't matter that there isn't a solid resolution for Piltover Zorn. We've seen what could have been in the parallel timeline in episode 7. We've seen what it could have been in the other direction with the intercity sort of wars. And now it's ambiguous up in the air, because now they're taking the strides forward. Who knows which direction they're going to go in? But the fact that they're taking that direction is enough resolution for me. Because the overall narrative, in my eyes, is exploring the regret of the bad ending and the forgiveness for the possibility of a good ending, And that was already narratively explored. They rounded that up, in my opinion. That it doesn't matter how it turns out in the end, because that narrative exploration has a full stop after it. There's also things that, the characters dying or Jinx maybe surviving, that sort of thing, which I don't know if that bothers me as much, to be perfectly honest. To me, Victor and Jace, I guess maybe it's because I've resolved them in my head. Do I think Jinx lived? Yes, I think Jinx lived, but she metaphorically died, symbolically died, such that peace could end up prevailing in Piltover and Zorn, or that sort of thing, because of the loaded symbolism that she realised herself can carry, and that she can finally break herself off from Vi, in the sense that Vi will always sacrifice herself to try and help Jinx. By breaking herself, she's sort of breaking that cycle, allowing Vi to live forcibly almost her own life. Jason Victor, I'm kind of in my opinion, it doesn't really matter what happened to them. It kind of matters what happened to them at the end. Then, are they alive, are they dead? To me, I'm just sort of I don't know if that matters too much to me. Because, I guess because they fulfilled that story arc of forgiveness, of understanding, which was what the narrative exploration was. Once that's done, it's does it matter? It matters, I guess, for personal satisfaction if you care about Jason Victor as personal characters. But in a narrative sense, which is how I approach Arcane, I suppose, that's done. It doesn't need to be done anymore. But it doesn't need to be a resolution to them. But Heimerdinger one, I will say, I'm a bit more iffy on, because I felt like it didn't really feed as much. Like I guess it's kind of like Heimerdinger didn't. It's Heimerdinger sort of redeeming himself for past transgressions of letting Zorn live in squalor or something like that, and passing on the torch to future generations. But I also don't really understand why Heimerdinger had to die in the first place, which I think is where my confusion mainly comes from. So those are the two bad main things. And I will say that if you didn't like Arcane for whatever reason, or those reasons or others, perfectly fine. Art is subjective. Opinions are subjective. You can not like something. That's totally fine. But I liked it. So, you know, as long as you understand that you not liking it doesn't mean other people can't like it. Or there's no one way which is inherently worse or better or worse. And that everything, all of these criticisms end up being quite subjective in the first place. There's hardly things which you can say are objective about it. There are things which you can say are fundamentally objective, or both good and bad, but inherently are rather meaningless in the end of the day, because your interpretation, my interpretation, the way anyone interprets any art is completely different from person to person, and will have a different influence based on, you know, the time of life that you watched it, the things going on, the current affairs and events, how you understood it, stuff like that, the things you noticed during it. So yeah, whether you like it or you didn't like Arcane, I think fundamentally doesn't matter, but as long as we can have a civil discussion about it is where the interest comes from. Anyway, I did like it, Arcane, a lot. And as I said, I like it because of the way it does there's a lot of narrative parallels, I think, during it, which you can go on, like, any news article, I'm sure, and they'll probably compile them together better than I have. But the narrative story, as I say, I talked about it a lot the first Animal Crossing episode. I talked about it. It's a story of kind of like regret of what could have been, like a car crash in slow motion which you can't stop, but you knew if anything had just gone slightly different, it wouldn't have happened. And season 2, I think, wonderfully built upon that, as they start to see like the things being put together and how difficult it is after the pieces have been broken. And I thought, oh, are they going to do this the regret story narrative once again, but as they shown in Act 3 and parts of and slowly throughout parts of Act 1 and Act 2, it's more of a story about forgiveness, about being able to understand these things happened, these things are terrible, these things are regretful, rueful, etc., etc. But it doesn't mean that there is nothing in the future to build from it. It doesn't mean everything is ruined forever because of it. It doesn't mean that the imperfection has sullied everything forever. I mean, you can see that through everyone's stories about how Vi and Jinx eventually sort of have like a messy reconciliation. Vi and Caitlyn's relationship coming together, breaking and coming back together again. Mel's forgiveness of her mother's transgressions despite everything. Stories like that. Jace and Victor, of course, being the big one at the end. You know, even Jace saying there's beauty in imperfections. It was a very beautiful, touching moment, I think. Yeah, so it was more of a story of forgiveness, which I think is a perfect sort of narrative follow-on from season 1, being of what could have happened, or season 2 sort of like, well, that did happen, and we've seen and we can see what could happen in the future, especially episode 7, which is my favourite of both seasons. This is the story that could happen. Should something slightly different happen, and should forgiveness be possible as a movement rather than anything else. And we've seen what happens when forgiveness is not possible, I suppose, in both ways, of like the entire pre-acts, I suppose, the entire preceding seasons and episodes, and also with Victor's like glorious evolution, being that forgiveness is, that imperfection cannot be laid true, I suppose, and Victor trying to sort of forgive his past self in a sense by trying to fix that mistake, and then Jason and Victor reconciling afterwards. So yeah, but those are like the general big narrative story arcs, the themes that I think I see, but there's also a lot of sub-themes. You know, like in season 1, there's a big sort of sub-theme of like family and love, but I think bigger in season 2 is the theme of sacrifice coming in, like what can be sacrificed, or what is sacrificing, and people living with consequences of the sacrifice. Isha, I think, being the biggest sort of symbol of sacrifice, right? Jinx Powder saving her, and then Isha saving everyone else through her sacrifice at the end. Well, at the end of Act 2, in a very beautiful moment. And seeing that, like, sacrifices, which, to be fair, Jinx didn't sacrifice as much, I suppose, to Takeshu, and so much as... Well, I mean, she probably did, but it's been 2 weeks since I watched Act 1, so I can't remember specific moments. It's sort of like that repayment of it. I thought it was very beautiful. What else was really cool, I think? Maddie's immediate betrayal and death, I thought was very cool in a very interesting way. How quickly that people have turned tail, I suppose, appreciating or loving Maddie to being like, how could she? I don't know what to say. The design, okay. This goes without saying, Arcane is gorgeous. So many stills from that movie. The same thoughts I had about Wild Robot, where it was like, Wild Robot, it's like every still could be like a painting. Every still could be like a background, a desktop background, which is how I judge whether something is a good painting or not. But Arcane Season 2 is gorgeous. So many cinematic shots where they were just like, let's throw aesthetics and artistic beauty in shovels and spades during the creation of this. They didn't have to go that hard, but they did. They were like, we could just have a scene here of Jinx looking mopey or whatever, and sad, or we could have this like very beautiful, like her overgrown hair just spiraling out, all surrounding her, almost like a radiating sun of madness, I guess. These beautiful shots just over and over and over again. Heart-wrenching, emotional moments. I've only got 3 minutes, so it's hard to skip through everything. What else is really cool? Episode 7, I think, was my favourite. A perfect showing of what could have been. Should, like, just one small thing, Vi dying, means that all these knock-on effects occurring of forgiveness between parties, leading to a better world. A world that could have been, but wasn't. Well, technically it is, because it's an alternate dimension, isn't it? It was a perfect sort of wind down before the big sort of climax in episodes 8 and episode 9. What else? Sorry, a little pause. I don't remember what I was saying. What else can I say about Arcane? Music's really good. There's a lot of multilingual songs, not multilingual, but like a lot of different songs with different languages, and right? Because obviously Heavy is a ground in English. There's a Chinese song at some point during the battle where Isha dies. There's that French song during episode 7 with Echo and alt powder dancing. Wasn't there like a Spanish song during that scene? The prison scene. Yeah, I don't know what else I wanted to say about it. I like completely lost my train of thought. It was just really cool. Designs, I think, was pretty cool. On the whole, I would say I'm not a big fan of Vander/Warwick-esque design, but that's probably because I know what Warwick looks like normally, and he looks like a wolf, and Vander kind of looks like a sort of batish, vampire-ish thing, which I hope, well, I mean, I should say, if that goes over to the game, I'm not going to buy an Arcane Warwick skin. I think there was a lot of cool, like, seeing alternate Jinx, I think was a really cool redesign. Her turning up in the final battle, who knows how she got time to dye her hair purple, I suppose, during it or whatever, but I thought that was a very cool update to her design. Victor was kind of cool, I would say. I'm not sure how I feel about the mask, because I understand the significance of there being that sort of like very blank figure at the front, which I felt was kind of cool, but then the human like figure underneath the mask, kind of would have liked it better without the human sort of thing. I think it's maybe the lips sort of put me off it a little bit, but I don't know how else you sell the fact there's a human mask under a human face underneath the mask, I suppose, without the lips being like the only thing which can really jut out horizontally. I would say his summons looked very, very cool. Whatever they were, I don't even know what to call them. The anomaly based robots. I guess so. I thought they were cool. I love the way they moved, because a lot of the times there's like erratic, unnatural movement, which is like jerky and that sort of thing, but they had a very unnatural, smooth movement, like the way they sort of almost glided over the building as they ascended it, which also I think helps paint a very sort of like angelic, elegant figure, despite it being so wholly unnatural at the same time. A good juxtaposition, I think, to Vishima powered Noxus people, question mark. What else can I even say about it? I don't know. Like, I understand, I guess my overall thing is, I understand where people's criticism come from, if it's not from something. And I think a lot of it's, I suppose, dependent on the story that they wanted being more reflected in Season 1, and then people wanting more of that Season 1 stuff, rather than necessarily the change, which was in Season 2, to sort of escalate things to grander scales. But I don't know, I was kind of all there for it. I was wholly enraptured during the entirety of episode 9. All the other episodes, I was like drawing at the same time, you know, doing thumbnail art, or working on something else. But episode 9, I literally stopped. I didn't even realise I stopped, and was holding the pen, just like staring at the screen the entire time, because I was just that enraptured by everything that was going on. Would I rewatch Arcane? Yeah, absolutely. When? I don't know, it's kind of long, it's a bigger part. It's a bigger problem with it, but I would watch it again. It's very, very good. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. If you haven't watched it, I don't know what you were doing watching this video, but please do go watch it. I can't wait to see what other stories they tackle. It's almost certainly going to be Noxus, it seems, with the Black Rose and the teaser for Swain at the end, but let's see how that goes. Anyway, if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Adam Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now.